Revelation 2779. From the 19th of June 1943. Weakened will of man. Meaning of the work of redemption. The human being is incapable of doing anything without God's grace. That is, his will is so weakened and his power of resistance so low that he would not be able to mature spiritually on earth without divine support, because God's adversary constantly oppresses him, influencing his will and thus making him incapable of fighting against him. The influence of God's adversary is so great on the human being because he presents him with the pleasures of the world, and the human being, in a state of free will, can now decide for himself. Endless times before, his will was bound and nothing was accessible to him but that which corresponded to his nature. Free will now allows his thinking, feeling and wanting to come into its own. His desires grow and are now directed towards things which still harbor completely immature spiritual substances, thus they are part of God's adversary, which he now uses as a lure to win back the spiritual substances which had already come closer to God again. Through these lures he weakens the human being's will in such a way that he would not be able to fulfill his actual earthly task if God did not help him with his grace. With his help. The influence of God's adversary on people was enormous before Jesus Christ came to earth, and people's will was so weakened that almost no human being was able to detach himself from matter, from the immature spiritual which tries to chain the already more mature spiritual to itself. God's adversary ruled the world, that is, man's will completely subordinated itself to his will, and thus he had great power. Now the will of a human being put up resistance to him. Jesus Christ recognized people's weakness and its dreadful consequences, and in his overwhelming love for people he sought to help them. He offered himself as a sacrifice for them in order to buy them a strong will, a will which was able to resist the adversary's activity. This was a gift which was thus acquired undeservedly for people, and again it depended on their will whether they wanted to accept the gift or not. God's adversary uses all means to prevent people from availing themselves of the grace of the act of salvation by trying to weaken it or deny it altogether. And again it is God's love and grace which is also extremely effective. That people are offered the truth from above, that they are enlightened about everything, and also the necessity of acknowledging Christ as Redeemer of the world is made so understandable to them that it is easy for them to believe in him and thus to place themselves in the blessing of the act of salvation. People's will is weak, but God constantly endeavors to impart strength and grace to them, because without it he cannot withstand the adversary's challenges, because he constantly needs God's help in order to master his earthly task, in order to be able to free himself from the influence of the one who wants to bring about his downfall. Despite his weakness, the human being is not helpless, for all blessings of the act of salvation are at his disposal, that is, if he believes in Jesus Christ as Redeemer of the world, in his death on the cross out of love for humanity, which was under the adversary's spell. If he calls upon Jesus Christ for his help, he will also receive the strength to resist. In all adversities and dangers threatening his soul, he will be supported and held by him, in whom his soul believes. He will constantly find help from him, divine grace will constantly flow to him, he will be able to separate himself from earthly possessions and strive towards God without hindrance. His spirit will recognize the truth with light and brightness. His love will grow, and thereby ever new strength will be supplied to him. The blessings of God will come to him. The graces of the act of salvation will become overwhelmingly effective in him and help him towards his own redemption. Amen.